millions and millions of cars, as you know, Mercedes and BMW and Volkswagen and many others, and we were restricted from restricted from selling cars into the European Union, which is not nice.
We have in the United States 2,000 companies from the German automakers with one round about 140,000 employees. Overnight, thousands of unclaimed new cars began lining up at ports in the United States. Automobile shipping, normally one of the most vibrant and exciting examples of the global trade that spans the globe, has fallen into a deep silence. Giant brands such as BMW, Audi and Mercedes-Benz have stopped the ships that were supposed to be heading to the American market and have begun to stock up in convenient port warehouses or bonded warehouses. This sudden cessation of the previously almost non-stop flow is the outward manifestation of an internal turmoil. The question everyone is asking is, how did the most prominent players in the automobile world end up in a giant holding pattern? The answer lies in President Donald Trump's tough tariff policies, which he introduced in early 2025. Trump's imposition of 25% tariffs on vehicles from Europe, especially Germany, which could rise to 50%, has thrown the wheels of trade into uncertainty. German automakers know that if they hit this tariff wall, they will face heavy costs. The price of luxury sedans and SUVs could suddenly jump by thousands of dollars, and stickers on cars at dealerships could skyrocket to levels that would drive customers away. Profitability could erode, and they could even become loss-making. In the last weeks of May 2025, ports on the east and west coasts of the US are busier than ever. This time, however, the congestion at the ports is more about the piling up of vehicles than their rapid dispersal. Hundreds or even thousands of new imported cars are unexpectedly stuck in customs warehouses or open-air parking lots. Most of these vehicles are of German origin: Audi, Volkswagen, VW, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Porsche. Recently, US President Donald Trump announced that he would impose tariffs of up to 50% on all European Union cars. This step has made the already uncertain transatlantic trade relations even more turbulent. The global automobile market, which has been volatile for the past few years, now seems to have been further shaken by Trump's ultimatum to either move production to the US or bear the tariffs. For Germany, automobile production is the backbone of its export revenues and industrial strength. The US market in particular provides close to 1/5 of the revenues of German brands. Various global factors such as Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the recession in China had already reduced the brand's profits. In the first quarter of 2025, two leading brands, Volkswagen and Mercedes-Benz, announced a decline in net profits of more than 40%. With the current tariffs, both profit margins and market share are under further threat. On the surface, these are tough political moves, but the truth is that nobody wants to make a big show of saying we're pulling out of the US. But for precisely these reasons, many brands are experiencing a partial withdrawal. Shipments are officially frozen, production is postponed, planned model launches are halted, and ships bound for the US may even change course mid-ocean. Some luxury models were rushed into the US before the full tariffs were announced. But this is not a sustainable strategy. For now, the safest method is to keep the ships off the road or park them in ports. Naturally, US ports have started to fill up with unexposed vehicles stacked on top of each other. According to German sources, Audi issued an internal memorandum on April 2nd, saying vehicle shipments to the US will be suspended until further notice. Even though many of its popular models, such as the Q5, are manufactured in Mexico, their distribution has been halted in the US. Train and ship services between Mexico and the US have been braked under the control of this brand. Some 37,000 Audi vehicles have been waiting for months in US ports or warehouses. The company has adopted a strategy of waiting, saying, "Neither pay customs duties nor bear the costs without selling our vehicles." According to leaked information from Audi, The sale of these vehicles waiting in ports has been postponed until the uncertainty over the tariff is resolved. There is concern that if the tariff climbs to 50%, it will be impossible to make a profit on the vehicles. 32 Porsche and Mercedes-Benz break after preload. Porsche and Mercedes-Benz, on the other hand, took the opposite path in April 2025. They made accelerated shipments to the US before the tariffs went up. Thus, after building up a certain stock at their dealers, they decided on a temporary freeze. New batches from Mexico or Germany are currently either waiting in ports or have never left. Mercedes-Benz sent tens of thousands of additional SUVs to warehouses in Alabama and Las Vegas. Porsche brought 5,000 extra sports cars into the US before the tariff kicked in. But now, warehouses are overflowing and dealers are worried. There are enough cars, but what will we do if demand drops or prices rise? If Trump's tariffs are officially approved, new batches will have to go through customs at high cost. Mundram. 3 Volkswagen and BMW price hikes cancelled launches. Volkswagen halted US shipments of models like the Jetta, Tiguan and Taos produced in Mexico. BMW suspended imports of sedans made in Germany. It also postponed some electric mini launches. Although BMW recently announced an average price increase of 4% in the US, more radical hikes seem inevitable if the 50% tariff becomes official. On the other hand, brands say, "We don't want to pull out altogether because the US market is critical." However, there is no clear answer to the question of whether to sell with high tariffs or freeze shipments and wait. Some models add months of waiting for trucks and ships, which inflates companies' inventory costs. Taking a freeze decision is essentially a wait-and-see if Trump changes his mind approach. Vehicles piling up at US ports. What will happen? Leaks from the finance and logistics sector confirm that US ports and warehouses are overflowing with cars. Vehicles that would normally be distributed to dealers in a few weeks can wait for months. The idea of using warehousing to delay or avoid paying customs duty is an ideal solution, but it is also a new burden for importers. Logistics costs are rising and the vehicles are depreciating in value. One only has to look at port reports from Los Angeles to Seattle, New York to Houston, to realize how deep the silence goes. In the months to 2025, when we would normally have 3 to 4 ships arriving per week, this number was halved, sometimes down to 0, says one automobile logistics company. Even during the high season, warehouses remain quiet. Forklifts and driverless trucks sit empty at the port. While some expect a port pile-up like in the first period of the pandemic, the opposite is actually happening. There is congestion, but it is a long-term parking, not arrivals and departures, but ships cancelling before arriving or car manufacturers choosing to wait for fear of customs duties. A customs official said, "Now, depending on the situation, we rent huge vacant lots near the ports and pile the vehicles there." Everyone is waiting for the president to finalize his decision on tariffs. If Trump backs down, these vehicles could be on the market quickly. But if tariffs rise, brands may even consider diverting them to other markets rather than selling them in the US. So at what point did this picture begin? In fact, we can characterize it as a psychological war. At the end of 2024, alarm bells started ringing when Trump said for the first time, "We are treating cars from Europe very unfairly. I'm fed up with it. 25% tariffs are on the way." Until then, the German giants had been very optimistic about the US market, even planning further investments, but the tariffs announced at the beginning of 2025 and signaled to be effective immediately suddenly made the situation serious. The president put Europe on the spot with harsh statements such as, "If you don't produce it on American soil, your right to sell it here will also be in trouble." The European Union, on the other hand, announced that it was preparing its retaliation lists and that counter-tariffs worth more than $100 billion were on the way. In this process, which resembled a chess match, automobile manufacturers made the first move. Shipments to the US were blocked. Audi, for example, announced in an internal memo that it was stopping all vehicles destined for the US and would replan according to economic and political developments. Of course, this was not shared with the public. Even dealers first noticed strange cancellations in logistics data. Similarly, Volkswagen suspended the transportation of some models from Mexico to the US. BMW is reconsidering production plans for its South Carolina plant while minimizing imports of the X series and other sedans from Europe. Mercedes-Benz will keep its Alabama plant but is cutting back on future plans. Porsche is in we have filled our own stock with rush shipments. Now we are monitoring the situation mode. Some brands bought thousands of extra cars in the December-January 2024 period, thinking let's build up our stock before the tariff arrives. But there is a limit to stock. Dealers are at a loss as to what to do with such high numbers, and exchange rates and import costs are out of control. On the other hand, every producer has the following question in mind. If the 50% tariff is finalized, how will we sell these cars? Maybe they won't. Luxury cars whose prices will increase by $15,000 will lose customers in a segment that already sells at high prices.